You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And we are here today to discuss our June 2025 book club pick, Afterparties, a short story collection by Anthony Veasna. So, as always, Books and Boba is supported in part by our listeners over on Patreon. So if you've been enjoying this podcast and would like to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba, where as a Patreon supporter, you gain access to our members-only Discord server. And if you join us at the Honey Boba tier, you also gain access to our monthly bonus podcast, Boba Chats, as well as the ability to help us pick a book club pick to read once every quarter. As always, thank you to everyone who has joined us on Patreon so far, and we would always love to see more of you there, so definitely check it out. And yeah, before we get started on discussing Afterparties, just a quick spoiler warning. In our book club discussion episodes, we do discuss all aspects of the book that we read, including themes, character development, plot twists, and all of that. So if you have not finished the book yet and do care about being spoiled on those things, this is your opportunity to hit pause on the podcast now, finish the book, and then come back and listen to our discussion.
Yeah, so before we dive into our discussion, I just want to give out some content warnings. If you are sensitive to mentions of genocide, substance abuse, suicide, mental illness, PTSD, just proceed with caution. However, I would say overall, like, this book is pretty funny despite a lot of the serious topics that are brought up. So, yeah, like, I do just want to bring up that caution just in case.
So yeah, let's get into it then. Rira, can you start us off as always with the book jacket description of Afterparties?
Yeah, sure. As the children of refugees carve out radical new paths for themselves in California, they shoulder the inherited weight of the Khmer Rouge genocide and grapple with the complexities of race, sexuality, friendship, and family. A high school badminton coach and failing grocery store owner tries to relive his glory days by beating a rising star teenage player. Two drunken brothers attend a wedding after party and hatch a plan to expose their shady uncle's snubbing of the bride and groom. A queer love affair sparks between an older tech entrepreneur trying to launch a safe space app and a disillusioned young teacher obsessed with Moby Dick. And in the sweeping final story, a 9-year-old child learns that his mother survived a racist school shooter. So I would be remiss to not mention this, but Anthony Veasna, so he passed away like a couple months before the publication of his short story collection. This series came out in 2021. He passed away in December of 2020, and he was 28 years old. And it came as like a really big shock to the literary community and also obviously the Asian American community. And I think just knowing about his untimely death really, like, it's like a ghost hanging over you while you're reading the collection. Just even the title of Afterparties, you know, like, it's just like,
I think it does give the book a very bittersweet sense, because like a lot of our book club members on Discord, and myself included, really, really enjoyed reading his short stories. Like, the way he writes, it's so like he brings you into this community, and he does a really good job like putting you in the shoes of like this community of Cambodians in, I'm gonna assume they're in probably San Joaquin Valley, Stockton area, because that's where a lot
Stockton.
of like Cambodians are. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this later on when we kind of take the book as a whole. But I really like, it is sad that we won't get any more stories from him, because he really did a great job capturing not only like the prevailing kind of pressures and sadness of like living in a refugee community that is still experiencing like their post-traumatic stress, but also like to mix that with like you mentioned, like just like humor that is dark humor is kind of, it's not easy to do dark humor, right? It's really easy to like kind of take it too far. And I think he does a really good job striking a balance where like you laugh along with the characters, but you also feel like maybe I shouldn't be laughing at this stuff, right?
I mean, it's like a recurring theme in this collection is like, if like, how do we move forward? And it's just like, I guess we move forward with humor, because what else can we do? You know, it is a coping mechanism.
Yeah, and it is a shame that, we've talked a lot, or the community has talked a lot about how representation matters and how saying representation matters isn't really enough anymore. We need to find a way to move past that. But at the same time, stories from the Cambodian community is still not something that we see a lot of these days. And, that's starting to change, right? It's much like, we have a lot more Vietnamese American authors writing stories with more nuance about their communities. And, representation in media is it's a progressive thing, right? Like you start off with like just showing your own community that their stories matter, that they're valid and they're worth telling. And I think that's something that this short story collection accomplishes really well. And, once you establish that, representation like this matters, you can move on to tell stories with like more intention behind it, like stories that are more, let's say, aspirational, or, like with a goal of like showing what could be possible.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, like, I always read the acknowledgements after finishing a book, and it was just like incredibly melancholic to like read him like thanking all these people for making this book possible. And like one of the things that caught my eye was to this one person, he said, thank you for being an airtight vault of all my opinions that the world is not ready for yet. And I was like, that hurts so bad, because I can only imagine how much Anthony pulled his punches, because this is mentioned in the book, and also like in other like I think it's mentioned in like Viet Thanh Nguyen's The Sympathizer, but they talk about how like the oppressed, they are able to kind of understand what will do well in the market. And it's kind of like, okay, I know exactly what type of story the quote unquote mainstream media wants to hear from me, like all the trauma dumping and all of the just like all of the drama, right? But that's not all they're gonna get from me. But at the same time, like I feel like because this is Anthony's first collection, there must have been a lot of like self-restraint, so yeah, that makes me like really sad when I'm like, oh, there's no more collections after this. There's no more follow-up after this. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's been a while since we've read a short story collection. And I think this one was just like, using culinary terms, it was like a progressive meal, right? Each story built upon the last one. Characters return or get mentioned in subsequent stories. And, sometimes even the stories play on each other, right? Like the fact that the monk story happened right after the end of the shop story, which ends with monks coming in to like bless the shop. I think he did a really good job just like creating a cohesive, in essence, like vertical slice of life in the Cambodian community and giving us a taste of that through multiple vignettes of like the people and families that he like focused on.
I was actually really surprised at how interconnected the stories were. They're very loosely interconnected, you guys, but like characters from the previous short story will like kind of make an appearance, or like a business that you recognize will make an appearance again in a different story. But all of the stories except for Human Development, so that's the one with like the Safe Space app, they were all published in literary journals, literary magazines. So I'm like, oh, okay, so these were like individual stories that you individually published, but somehow in this collection, these characters all coexist somehow in this universe that you've created. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, he had his own like literary cinematic universe, right? And it was really cool that, I mean, that's kind of how these enclave communities are, right? Everyone knows each other. Everyone gossips about each other. Everyone like kind of...
Also, like the setting is very specific. Stockton, Central Valley, California, post-recession. Like you see abandoned strip malls, broken street lights. It's like very vivid, okay? And I don't know, like there's something very cinematic about it. And I was just thinking about like, it's like, oh, this could be a TV series. It's just like...
Yeah, like I think it was really timely for us to read these stories now in like our current situation, not to like, not to dwell on, what's happening outside, but, we can't ignore the fact that like the communities that Anthony writes about are the exact communities that are like under siege right now from like immigration rates and things like that.
Yeah, much like Anthony's ghost and the ghost of the auto genocide, I could not get rid of the ghost of what's happening literally on my street, like every single day, because that is the reality that we live in, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's not hard to picture these characters in like our everyday lives, you know. I always struggle with how we should discuss short story collections. And honestly, I think the best way to go about it is to go in order of stories, because they do kind of like stack up against each other. So
I agree.
don't know.
That's what I was just going to suggest too, because there's such a progressive element to each story, right? Each story kind of flows into the next. So yeah, let's do that. Let's just go story by story. There's 9 short stories in total. Let's just
And
see
some
how
of
it
them
goes.
are like much shorter, and will probably
Yeah.
have like less to say than some other of the chunkier stories. But
Yeah.
first story was Three Women of Chuck's Donuts, and this was originally published in the New Yorker. And I have to say, this was a banger of like a story to start with.
This was a lot of fun. Yeah, it's like there's mystery, there's like family drama, and then there's like the climax. Like the resolution is also like pretty funny, right? So I don't know. What did you think about the Three Women of Chuck's? I think it's really, you know, if anything, Cambodian donut shops are probably the most recognizable aspect of like Cambodian immigrant life, if only because it's probably the aspect of like the Cambodian immigrant experience that has been the most present in like media representation, right? There's that.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, so we've read Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki
Mhm.
for a previous book club pick, and there is like one of the settings in that book is a Cambodian run donut shop that's actually not Cambodian run. It's like alien refugees, but it's still like it's a whole like play
It's a
on
metaphor,
it. But
yeah.
yeah, it's a metaphor, and it's just there's something charming and funny about like an old school donut shop going through like unbelievable things, you know, like shenanigans. Only this one is like, I mean, it's not as funny as Aliens, or
Yeah.
it's actually like quite sad, because so the premise of the story is that there is this mysterious man who looks Khmer, and he comes into the store random hours during like the night, and he orders an apple fritter, doesn't eat it, and he just stays there for hours. And the mother who owns the shop, she is worried that the man is like a hitman hired by her shady former brother-in-law who like bankrolled the shop because you know, they needed capital to start up the shop.
Uncle-in-law,
after.
right? It's her
Was it
ex-husband's
uncle-in-law?
uncle, quote unquote
Okay.
uncle, right? We all have uncles who may or may not be blood related, but definitely are involved in something shady, right?
Yeah. So like she's worried that it's a hitman that the shady uncle hired, because her ex-husband, it turns out that he had a second family. He had like kids with another woman, and instead of using the money that they profited from the donut shop to pay back their loan to the shady loan shark uncle, he decided to fund his second family.
Yeah, there's a lot of a running theme. In a lot of these stories is like mating shit, right?
It's like, oh, another Cambodian man, and I'm like, oh dang, like
yeah.
I did not know that this was a stereotype in a way, but
I think it's a story that I've heard time and time again, especially when it comes to like refugee stories, and like it's not unique to the Cambodian community, but definitely like because a lot of, or from, you know, colloquially, I don't know if this apocryphal or not, but like in refugee camps, right, families are much more likely to be repatriated into the United States than singles. So a lot of people paired up in the camps to present as a family in order to, you know, be given a slot in, you know, in the US. And because these marriages are like literally on paper only, those, I guess, is what leads to some of these families or some of these men having second families that they once they find someone they're actually attracted to and they love. But
yeah, and also, I mean, it has everything to do with like the patriarchy, you know? It's like thinking about like, okay, well, like if the men has like all legal control over finance and like deeds and whatnot, it's just like, oh, I can do whatever the hell I want. I can have a second one. And also like it depends on like if you are of like the Chinese ethnicity and like you grew up with the idea of having, you know, multiple wives is okay. Is like,
and in the short story, they make it a point to like try to figure out whether this guy is like Khmer or Chinese, right? Because there is a difference between like Khmer Cambodians and Chinese Cambodians, Chinese Khmer. And I think much like, you know, other Southeast Asian countries, like there is like being Chinese or being indigenous does carry different connotations as well, right?
yeah. And I do like how the guessing game is like a mirror turned towards like the daughters, because the daughters, they talk about how like in school they're always called Chinese because the other classmates don't know any better. Like they have no idea what the genocide is. They don't have no idea what like Cambodia is, and probably only knows China as like the only Asian country that they know. But it's like here they are playing the guessing game with a customer.
Yeah,
customer.
And
yeah.
I mean, he's suspicious too because he comes and orders an apple fritter, but doesn't eat it. He just sits there and like looks out the window, and so that causes a lot of anxiety for the mom, but also triggers curiosity from the daughters, right?
It's like, is it our father? Like, and it's like, no, it can't be our dad. Or it's like, oh, maybe it's like a lost relative, and in a way, kind of, it can be anybody. But
yeah.
I think like a central theme in this story is like what does it mean to be Kaima, and like how do you differentiate, and does it matter? And because it seems like their parents are always rewriting the rules on what makes them, their daughters, like Kaima enough. And
yeah,
it's like, oh, you do this one little thing and that's like totally not what Kaimas do. And it's like, okay, but who wrote the rules? You did. So
yeah, and that's something that definitely is relatable for any of us who grew up as like a second generation or even 1.5 generation, like someone who's, you know, like formative years were in a different country than before, right? Because for the daughters, their conception of being Khmer is what the parents teach them. So if the rules are always changing, then it gets really confusing, right?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, like you're drinking a drink with ice cubes in it. You're not Khmer enough because we didn't have ice cubes back in my day. And it's just like, I don't think ice cubes is what makes your cultural heritage, but you guys get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's part of it is also just like sometimes parents just need to find, like, especially, I don't know if it's like an Asian thing or just like, and I don't know, like, you know, as a new parent, I don't know if I'm going to turn this person or not, but like sometimes you just need to like nag your kid. And
you don't need to, but yeah, I mean, there's another story that I'll like bring up this topic again on like each generation thinking that they should live a better life, but also resenting the next generation for living a better life.
What did you think about the resolution that this guy that's like sitting in this coffee shop turns out to be just another like jealous husband spying on his wife?
I was just like, wow, that was like climactic. But also I was like, did you just kill someone? Because it was unclear for like a couple paragraphs whether this guy was dying or not, because he got bonked on the head with a pan and there was blood on the floor. And I'm like, oh, dang, did they just commit murder in their donut shop? And I thought it was really funny when they called 911 and they're like, you're like close to the hospital. Can't you just like bring him there yourself? And I was like, wow, our taxpayer monies.
Yeah.
So like they go through the hassle of just like dragging him all the way to the hospital. And thankfully he's like able to, you know, he's not dead. He's alive. And I just loved how the story ends. It says, then they drag the man's heavy body toward their parked car. The man, barely conscious, begins to groan. The three women of Chuck's Donuts have a variation of the same thought. This man, they realize, didn't mean much at all to them, lent no greater significance to their pain. They can hardly believe they've wasted so much time wondering about him. Yes, they think, we know this man. We've carried him our whole lives. And I'm like, yeah, another useless man, another deadbeat.
What a brutal final line.
It's like, why did we waste our time? What a great way to end the story. Which is why I was like, oh man, starting off strong. Okay.
Yeah. I really like the next story. Super King's son scores again. And I like that, the central theme is like in all communities, we'll always have that one guy who like peaked in high school, right? What did you think of Super King's son?
I would say this was like one of my preferred stories because it was just I felt like it was a good balance between like absurdity, humor, and like something like really serious, as in like, oh, his grocery store is failing, and like there seems to be like loan sharks or gang activity that's happening around his area, and like clearly like he didn't really stand a chance in life, and badminton was this one thing that he could always prove his worth with, and it's like, oh, like this is sad, but also it's pretty funny considering how bitter he is towards Justin, the new recruit and like son of a pharmacist, because he's just like, it's like how dare he like contradict my conditioning plan for the other recruits. How dare he think that he is like better than everyone else because he grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. And it's like, but like it's like, didn't you, like, isn't that the point for the next generation to live better than you, to live safer than you, to have better opportunities, and then you resent them for it, for being more educated than you and being able to like choose extracurricular activities that they want to pursue? Yeah, it's just
also he himself has been dropping the ball majorly, right? So like, it's not like he's coming and taking it from him. You're also giving him the opportunity to. I think it's kind of fun to like see people's reactions. So Nina, our Honey Boba member, mentioned this on Discord, which is she's on the part of her reading journey where she's starting to relate more to the adults rather than the young people. And she felt really bad for the coach because badminton's all he had. And she definitely also had similar teacher figures growing up who seemed to take club activities way too seriously. So it's very relatable. And, while I did feel bad for the situation that Super King's son is in, a lot of what happened to him, especially in the badminton club, was, like we mentioned, like self-inflicted, right? Like
Like he was a bad coach.
Yeah, he didn't have time.
Don't sign up to be a coach.
He didn't have the time to put in to like be a proper coach to these kids, but he got mad at them for like not listening to what he said. And it's interesting because as the story went on, you can see the respect of his team like fall in real time, right? Like,
yeah. I thought it was so funny when they were playing when they were playing like the match, and all the other kids are like, wow, this is the best badminton game that we've ever seen. Wow, look at those smashes, look at those what is it, drop offs? I don't know the terms. And then like after like half an hour they're like, I'm bored. Neither of them are dominating the other, and it's just two people just hitting the shuttle back and forth, like so they go on to like do their homework, they're playing cards, or like it's so boring.
It's like it's not that serious, guys, but for these
it's
two,
just badminton.
And like at the start of the story, like the kids like idolize this guy, right? Like he was like the badminton player they all dreamed to be as good as him, and at the end they're like watching this old guy like celebrate like very crassly after beating like a high school kid, and they're like, man, this guy ain't shit.
I mean, it's sad. Part of the reason why it's sad is because he inherited the Cambodian grocery store from his father who passed away, and I mean, it wasn't a great shop when his father was running it, so he kind of inherited like a dying carcass of a shop.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he probably also inherited the debts, right? Like,
oh yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like it's sad because the community relies on the shop to provide them all the things from home that they can't get anywhere else. but also it's like there's like no monetary support really. Like it's just barely hanging on. And it's just like, wow, it's so sad. You inherit this shop from your father, and the community like looks to it as kind of like a pillar and as a way to like honor their heritage, and it's just dying, and no one seems to be able to care for it properly.
Yeah, it's definitely the type of place that like is a, a load-bearing pillar of the community. But because the expectation is to serve the community, and this is something that you and I experience a lot working in community orgs, a lot of people just take their services for granted, right?
We'll bring this back up in discussing the shop, which is like 2 stories away from now. But yeah,
and it doesn't help that like the Cambodian culture, much like a lot of Asian cultures, it's very relationship based, and as like a provider for a service for the community, Super King's Son is like expected to make concessions. And it was interesting to see that as the story went along, not only did the kids' respect for Super King's Son decline, but the grocery store itself also declined, right?
yeah, and like it's so sad when he's talking about how like when I was your age, I had to like condition while I was like stocking up the shelves. Like that's how I like practice like my wrist movements. You guys get to like do this at a gym properly. And but then like he spews something along the lines of all you have to do is like study, and that's like not hard at all. And the kids are like, actually it is pretty hard. You don't know how hard it is for a Cambo kid to do well in school. Like just because we don't have to work for our parents in order to survive doesn't mean that we're having a great time over here. And that is a recurring theme,
Yeah. It's kind of like this idea that I suffer, so you have to suffer too. And that's how generational trauma propagates itself, right? Which is like, I didn't have it easy, so over my dead body, are you going to have it easy too?
But that was the whole point. The whole point is to have it be easier for each generation. Also, like this is just a little personal rant, but like, what is the point of you getting higher education and getting like a good paying job only for your parents to disregard your like professional opinion on everything? Like say you're a doctor, you went through like med school, you did you did the exams, you paid your dues, you did residency, and your parents are just like, I don't believe you. I don't believe in the diagnosis that you gave me. And it's like,
I mean, it's because we come from cultures that value seniority over all else, right? Seniority and patriarchy, right? So like, if you're a younger man, you're wrong. If you're a younger woman, you're always wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I think
gotta love it.
Like it's not just Asian communities that do this, right? This is like what we've been up against as like millennials for our entire lives, which is like boomers and in some aspects Gen X always like belittling us, right? Like I saw a TikTok the other day of like this boomer guy still saying, "Oh, just wait till millennials have to pay for their own houses, then they'll know what's up."
Yeah,
right?
I saw that post. Yeah, and it's like you do know that the youngest millennials are now 31. Like,
Yeah.
like we are not like in our early 20s just graduated from college. That's not it.
And the thing is, like, yeah, you think we need to suffer like you did to become tougher, but it's like, no, we've been suffering for our entire adult lives.
In fact, we've been suffering more than you have, previous generation. Like, we have, I really don't want to like go down this route, but it's just like, yeah, like we are the most educated, but the most underpaid, can't afford houses, can't afford cars. Like there's a reason why there is like a fertility crisis in the States and other developing countries, because capitalism has killed it.
Yeah, and Super King's Son, he does perpetuate this, but he also was someone like, again, yeah, he picked in high school, but also like the community being, I think a lot of the stories here kind of have like a melancholic, kind of bittersweet vibe to it, because time and time again, we see how people can't seem to escape this community, right? Even people that leave the community end up coming back or get drawn back. And I think, we start with Super King's son, who is someone who was kind of not allowed to leave and kind of has to remain in Arrested Development, and can only, like, it's sad that he only has badminton to like stake his like pride on, and even that is like being taken away from him because of the realities of owning a failing grocery store.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can protect your legacy by being a better coach, but obviously you're trying to save your father's legacy, and it's just a lot conflicting interests,
Yeah.
But yeah, like, let's move on to the next story. Next story is Molly, Molly, Molly. And this is about a baby shower for Molly, who is like a teen girl who. This is the trouble with these stories, because like people have the same names sometimes, and then you don't know like the degree of familial relationship. So you're like second cousin, third cousin, like
So Molly is, I want to say, the cousin of the baby that they're throwing this party for, and the party is to welcome back the soul of Molly's mom, who they believe has been reincarnated into the new baby. And the narrator is Molly's cousin, who I forget his name, Ves, who is also like leaving to go to college, right? He's going to UCLA. He's like, one of the few that like quote unquote made it out, right? Or is going to make it out. It's kind of like a one last night story where him and his cousin Molly, they're really close, but he is kind of leaving her behind, and she's kind of having a hard time about it.
Yeah. I think it is funny that they are technically not at the party. They're just like getting high like in their truck, and it's like, oh, they're pre-gaming before the party, and the collection is called Afterparties. And Vez, as someone who is about to leave for college and potentially just like leave the confines of like poverty that this community has been suffering in, it's like, okay, like I can see the end. Like, I can see the start of the new day, the new chapter, but like what do I do now to pass the time? And one of the things that they do to pass the time is they go to like the video rental store, the DVD store, and then they watch porn together. And I thought that was a little bit unsettling. I was just like, what am I reading? What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's unsettling, but definitely like,
I guess it was the
first story that like went graphic, right?
Yeah.
And part of the story that's also as the narrator is gay, and kind of has a thing for Molly's boyfriend, right? And kind of is going through his own, I won't say awakening, but his own journey, like saying goodbye to his life and kind of worrying, like he is worried about Molly, right? And something that the story does that I thought was really cool was kind of jump forward in time, right? Like he talks about how like Molly's boyfriend ends up being enlisted into the military, and also how like how Molly herself will eventually become a mom. And I thought that was really cool. Kind of like, I wonder if it's like a commentary on like people who stay in the community, people who stay home, like stay as essentially townies, like their future is kind of set, right? Like you can predict where they're going to go, because it's really hard to get out.
Yeah, I mean, you see the paths that are like paved across you, like in front of you, and it's like there's not that many paths out of here. So you can probably guess like how people are going to end up if they stay in this town. And I thought it was kind of like horrifying, this idea of Molly's dead mother being reincarnated into this baby, because the baby didn't ask for that. And also, I think it's like completely unfair and creepy that you have like a traumatized dead person who is reborn, and therefore the reborn doesn't really get to live their life free or fresh. And I'm like, well, that is the reality of generational trauma. You cannot escape it. The ghost has to be passed down somehow.
Yeah.
It's just weird that they had it sounded like the community didn't really believe it. It was just Ma Eng, the grandmother, the grand aunt, who was just like, "Yup, this is my dead niece." So
it feels like, so this is something that my family kind of does too, which is like, we're on paper, I think we identify, or my parents identify as like Buddhists, but we don't really follow like Buddhism, like capital B Buddhism that like, you know, Siddhartha follow. But kind of like a Chinese version of Buddhism that's kind of a combo of Buddhist teaching slash like ancestor worship. And it kind of feels like, you know, this is like the, whatever religion this family identifies at, it definitely has like some aspects of Buddhism into it, specifically like the reincarnation aspects, right? And so, you know, I'm not Cambodian, so like I can't speak to what their religious or spiritual traditions are, but it definitely, like, you know, it definitely feels like it's, even if it's only Ma Eng who believes this stuff, it is embedded in their culture enough that they have like traditions around it, right?
yeah, they'll have like a baby shower slash reincarnation welcome back
And you know,
party.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk more about this practice because this is one of the few stories that actually has a direct sequel later on in the short story collection. But it really, yeah, it did seem like the type of thing that like can mess with somebody, right? And you know, in this story, we see how it messes with the daughter of the woman who is supposedly being reincarnated, and later on, we find out more about how it messes with the baby itself when she grows up, right?
It was funny because when I was reading it, I'm just like, poor baby. Like, this baby is gonna grow up to be like, have like some questions about her identity if her community continues to treat her as like a reincarnation of this lady who, like, from like context clues, it sounds like she killed herself from from deep depression. I honestly have to like reread again, but it sounded like,
in this first story it's more vague. I think in the follow-up later on, we get a more explicit recounting of what may have happened. Again, it's all through dreams, so like who knows what actually happened.
But the topic of survivors who have survived the genocide and come to America only to, you know, take their own lives, you know, that is a topic that is brought up, and I guess it is like a comfort to their loved ones to think, okay, well, like reincarnation, right? They'll come back and have like a better chance at life. But at the same time, it's like, well, this baby, this is their first life. It is a very like messed up cycle, and Molly is resentful because it's like, if the idea that her mother can be reborn as her second cousin's baby, then why can't her dead mother be reborn as her own daughter? She's like, why can't I be a mom to, you know, my late mom, give the love that, you know, she couldn't give me as a mother? And also, like, she also has like this unsettling fear and paranoia that the child that she'll end up having in the future will be a reincarnation of Ma Eng, the grandmother slash aunt. Again, I like the relationships, the familial ties in this relationship. Everyone's a cousin, everyone's an aunt, everyone's an uncle. But I was like, what an interesting fear to have. And there's like a little bit of hope at the end of the book, because you're like, oh, she's not taking out her resentment on this baby, so maybe things are okay. But then in the sequel, you're like, oh no, that resentment came back and festered, and wow. Yeah. I think this was one of those stories where I was like, okay, like it's made stronger by the sequel. surprisingly enough. I think the sequel makes the story better.
I mean, it's part of it, right? I actually mean before I realized that the net like the I think it's the eighth story was a sequel. It still was a pretty good like vignette of if you look at it as like a story between like the baby shower for the reincarnated soul is kind of the backdrop of this story between two cousins, one who is leaving and one who is staying, right? And kind of how that divides them, right? Like they grew up together up to this point, and now they're at an inflection point where one person is moving on and one person is staying. And what does that do to the relationship, right? Like, because it's we don't find out whether or not Vez comes back. So kind of like,
Yeah.
and in a lot of like coming of age stories, like leaving town is kind of the end point, right? It's like kind of the goal. But in this community, leaving town means leaving behind your family and like your entire like support structure, right? So yeah.
And in the next story, The Shop, it's interesting because the previous story, Mali, like Vez is pretty much the narrator, and he's one of the ones who has the chance to leave and leaves. And we come to the narrator of this story, and in the story of The Shop, it's a college grad who did leave town, but then came back, and now is working at his dad's shop.
I really like this story. I like that it played off directly from the last story in terms of like, even if you leave, it doesn't like guarantee that you've made it, right? And I think it's interesting to think about because for a lot of Asian families, and I don't want to speak for all Asian families, but it really does feel like, in my experience as an East Asian, right? So getting into college is like the one goal you have for the first 18 years of your life, because that's supposed to set you up for the rest of your life. And like what they don't prepare you for is after you graduate and get into the real world, are you ready to take that on? Right. And something that we find time and time again, as millennials who like had to go through, 2, 3, 4, world changing, like
I think it's way more than that. Yeah. But yeah.
Multiple recessions, multiple like world changing events. Like it takes more than good grades to make it. And that's something that this narrator from The Shop also experiences. Like he did the right thing. He did everything he was supposed to do. He went to college, he got his degree. And then he realized that the world was not ready for him, not like built for him. Like he was not in the best position to succeed as an adult. And so he kind of had no choice but to move home and like help his dad with his business, because that was the only path left for him.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say to like some of the people in the neighborhood, like the doctor's wife who comes over every day and is like very nosy and meddles with other people's lives and is very judgmental. Like to people like her, he's considered a failure, right? It's like, oh, you went to college, but you're back here and you're taking care, you're helping your dad's like shop. But the whole reason why he has this shop is so that you could have so you could go to college and have a better life so that he doesn't have to run this shop anymore.
Yeah. And, the shop itself, the father is shown as like, is portrayed as a guy who wants to do right by his community, right? He makes sure he hires fellow Cambodians who may not be able to get a job anywhere else in order to make sure that they have the money to support their families, but also in doing so puts himself in like bad positions, right? Like it was really frustrating to read how, even though he was giving his fellow Cambodians, jobs in a way to make a living, it didn't seem like they appreciated it, and it didn't seem like they like were willing to put in the work to pay or to like return that favor, right? Like there's a story where one of his workers ends up misplacing a truck that they're working on. Like he left the key in the ignition and the truck was stolen. And
then fire the guy. Like that is like fire a guy, file a police report. Like, but you won't do that against your own kind, right? Like you don't want them to face legal repercussions of the consequences of their actions, but it's just like,
And
you did a bad job.
And it's the fact that he doesn't do that allows
it breaks my
them
heart
to do it, right? And it's like
and the fact that it wasn't even the first time they did something like this, because there was a car that was taken for a joyride by an unhoused gentleman, and he is a gentleman because he brings the car back and he's like, hey, had a great time. But not all unhoused people are going to be like that.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is like a commentary on like what the refugee mentality does to you, which is like that you don't think about community, or you think of community as a one-way street, right? Like, we see throughout a lot of these stories that a lot of the relationships between family members, between community members are transactional. But it also feels like, like we saw this with the Super King son story as well, which is like certain relationships are also taken for granted, right? It definitely feels like the dad's relationship to his workers are taken for granted. Like, of course, you're going to offer us a job. We're a community member, so you want to make sure that we survive. But at the same time, we're not willing to like
do your job.
Yeah,
like literally the bare minimum. Okay, do your job. And also like when I read that the dad had hired like a dozen mechanics. I'm like, a dozen mechanics for a small shop? Like that is nonsense. You will not make a profit.
I mean, it's a small shop that lost a large amount of its business, right? Because of the incident with the stolen truck, right? Like if that hadn't happened, then they might have justified having 12 mechanics. If they were like if all the bays were constantly filled and they had good business. But because of that one incident, basically the only clientele he has are other Cambodians who come from word of mouth. And because they're other Cambodians, he's always giving friend prices, right? He's always and it was just sad to read because you can tell like there's a sense of like, I don't know if it's dread in the air or like melancholy. This shop isn't long for the world, right? Like it's not at some point they're not gonna be able to pay their rent, they're not gonna be able to continue to function, and then the entire community loses. And I don't know if this is because we've also worked in community organizations where there's a lot of ungratefulness going around, but like you can just see that like if the body shop fails, the dad's still gonna be blamed for like losing everyone's jobs, right?
Yeah, and not the person who like got the car stolen and was horrible with customer service, being like, well, like that's what it is. Like, I guess a car got stolen, and I'm like, no, that is your responsibility, man. And it's just, it was really sad, and also like at the same time, the humor in this story is like pretty spot on, because there's the doctor's wife who like comes every day, right? And she maps out the narrator's life, being like, I know you're gay, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get married, shouldn't have children. And like, she's like, you need to make sure, since you're a US citizen, you need to make sure you get all the money you can from people who want to have like a green card marriage or like whatever. Like, make sure you marry a Thai princess. And I was just like, what is this Delulu?
Just
like,
a great portrayal of like the town busybody. I thought, and I think that's kind of what Anthony does really well, is just humor that's like, I think when you're in a situation where things are just bad and there's not a lot of hope and there's just a lot of like everyone's in survival mode, like that's why gallows humor exists, right? Because you have to make light of your situation, because if not, you're just wallowing in despair, right?
Yeah. One of the lines that I highlighted was the doctor's wife is like smacking him around, being like, stop joking, blah, 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 right? And he goes, violence will not solve our problems, and neither will the model minority myth. Because she's like, why didn't you come back to town? Why didn't you become a doctor?
Why doctor?
Like, why doctor? And it's like, you think that will solve all of our problems? No.
But you know what will solve all their problems? A bunch of Buddha statues. And
I
what did you
know.
think about the resolution where it's
I
like,
really laughed at that. I'm just like, as if that is going to save their business.
yeah,
I mean,
you know what be,
sure,
you
like
know,
people showed up with their wallets, being like, oh, I'll like, bring my car around so that they can, have some form of income, but the prices are so cheap, and it's like you're not like, I don't know, it's just a temporary band-aid to like a
yeah.
wound that needs to be cauterized.
Also, you're still coming expecting the friend price, right? So you're
The
not
friend
actually,
price, yeah.
Helping. And like we end with the doctor's wife calling in the monks to come bless the store. And there's that one line where it's like, don't we usually call them monks when things are real bad? Like this is usually a sign of the end, right?
Yeah, it's like you call them when you open the business, and then it's like they're not supposed to come back.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like reincarnation, It's like maybe this shop has another life in it. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. But that leads us directly into the next short story, The Monks, which I thought it was pretty cool to like follow up. Like, the monks appear in the shop as like this force to like a last ditch effort to correct like the bad spiritual juju in this business. And then in the next story, we find out like, the monks aren't really, they're kind of just people too. And they're not exactly like the most spiritual themselves.
Yeah. The narrator for the monks is actually Molly's boyfriend from the previous short story, Molly, Molly, Molly. And he's like, he's enlisted into the army. He has like a couple like weeks left before his deployment. And, his shitty father died. And this is why he is, at the Wat, the Buddhist temple, like doing chores and trying to gather good karma for his dad, who like pretty much abandoned him, only contacted him if he wanted weed. It's just like, why are like everyone's just like, your dad was shit. Like, why are you doing this? No one expects you to do this.
Yeah, I think, reading this story really reminded me of, or made me think about like the disconnect between like once you immigrate to a new country, like your relationship to the customs of the old country, right? And it's kind of like a spiritual successor to Molly, 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 which is like, here is a guy who is doing something because he's told, or he's been told that this is how Cambodians honor the dead, right? This is what he should be doing. And he wants to like, a part of him wants to like hold on to that piece of culture. And that's why he's here. But he also has no idea why he's here, right? He only knows that he should be here.
Yeah. And he's like, aren't I supposed to be, doing enlightenment tasks instead of like doing dishes? And they're like, just sweep the floor and do dishes. Like,
yeah. I think this story also like, a lot of people have like this idea that monks are like just a spiritual, like they're they're trying to pursue enlightenment. They're like very like above the world and stuff. But it's like, monks have smartphones. Monks watch TV. Monks smoke. Like if you look at like go to any temple, there's always like there's the people that are really into it, but there's also the people that are kind of just there. And this is from like just hearing stories about in Taiwan, which is like sometimes when people are having trouble or they need to like escape and like instead of going to like Joshua Tree for the weekend or some like mountain retreat, they go to the temple and like hang out there from like a few days to like a few months. It's kind of just a way for them to like get away from the world and like recenter themselves.
Yeah, I would say like this was one of my like least favorite stories out of the bunch. Even though like I was just like, haha, monks being like, we smoke and like, oh, you buy into the spiritual juju. I mean, we're just doing this because it's custom. And it's like, okay, whatevs. Like, what does it mean to be a diasporan and you inherit like the spirituality? And it's just like, well, is this real spirituality when we're not even in like the Cambodian mountains, where like the customs are actually supposed to be be like this? Like, regardless of all that, like it's, I found like the narrator, Rithi, the guy who enlisted and he's serving for his dead father. I was just like, wow, he's such a meathead. Like he's counting like push-ups or whatever, because he's like, there's nothing else to do except count. So I guess I'll count like my workout. And then he constantly thinks about like Molly and her body. And then there's like graphic masturbation towards the end. Graphic team masturbation.
Yeah, there's a circle jerk that happens, and I will say, it happened again.
And I was like,
circle
did
jerk
I need to
scene.
read this?
Sorry,
I was just like, did I need to see this? Did I need to read this?
I will say, I will have to confess, it happened again. I was listening to this book through audiobook on Spotify, and that scene hit exactly when I was pulling up to pick up a to-go order, a drive-through order at the McDonald's. So I had to like really quickly turn it down.
That's yeah. I too was reading parts of this book on Spotify. I didn't actually really like the narrator all that much, the audiobook narrator's voice. So I was like, okay, well, I'll, mainly read with my eyeballs. And then like, when I have to do other tasks, I'll like listen to the audiobook.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that I had it on speaker and we got to the circle jerk part of of the book, and Dan was just like, ew. Okay.
I actually had to rewind a few times because it kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it did come out of nowhere. Yeah, that was another thing I had to deal with. Like Dan giving me all these puns, being like, "Oh, man, they're monkeying around because they're," and I'm like, "Please,
because he's chatting with the young monk who just joined the
young monk,
like the one that's his age, right? That's just joined the monastery.
Oh no,
the
you
temple.
meant younger. Okay, I thought you said yum monk. Like
no, the young
don't.
Well, he might have been young too, right? He's he's younger.
Yeah.
He's but like they were just chatting, and then he saw the picture that like was printed on like printer paper, the picture of Molly, and all of a sudden they're like both jacking off, and it's like, oh, like I kept rewinding because I thought, was there a lead up to this? Like, was there like
no,
it's just like
they're just horny.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, I guess they're young people, and it's authentic in a way.
Yeah. But it's just an interesting follow-up to the last story where the monks were seen as the last resort, like to bring the spirituality back to the store. And it's like, man, these monks aren't that spiritual either.
I was like, these are your champions?
Yeah.
Like
I mean, from a strictly like spiritual perspective, how much karma could they actually bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did think it was a little bit sad that the reason why the younger monk B or whatever, he he's like around the same age as Rythy, and the reason why he chose to be like a professional monk, because he's not there like part-time like Rythy is, like he's there as like a professional monk, and it's because he didn't really see any other paths that suited him. And it's kind of like a parallel to how like the military was a path that Rythy could only take that was like beneficial, and it's like, it's really messed up to do military recruitments at like high schools. I think that's like really, really messed up. But also to do it at like a high school filled with children of refugees who escaped war, and you're like, wow, you're sending those people.
But that's like the bread and butter of of recruitment. And even that won't, not to bring it back to our current day, but there's that one Purple Heart soldier that served in the military who had to self-deport because of like a past criminal record, right? And
that was caused due to PTSD.
Yeah.
By the way. And he was like, he said he was clean, and like it was like no problem until it became a problem. It resurfaced. But it's just sad because he sees it as like a good thing, being like, oh, I don't have to think about the next step, because if I go to the military, they'll like give me the orders. I don't have to really think about like my own like future. Like they have like the plans set up. Yeah. And yeah, it's like, oh, and like, if I want to go to college, like they'll give me money. There's like all these options. And it was like particularly sad to me when his uncle, who's like taking care of him as like, as a father would have, like he was so against him going into the military because of the war, right? The genocide that they had escaped from. And he's like, no, I can see why you would. I think the military would be good for you. I looked it up and I'm like, oh man, no. It's just,
I mean, it's sad, but also you can see where
It's
he's coming
life.
from too, because like, yeah, there's not a lot of, again, pathways for people. Like, I think, I think that's the kind of the main, one of the main differences between like East Asian narratives and Southeast Asian narratives, where it's like, especially like with East Asian immigrants, like by and large, we came from, you know, especially like, you know, we're talking about like the 80s, 90s, like that wave of immigration. Like we came during the Immigration Naturalization Act, where a lot of more educated families came over, and families who like being educated was part of like not just
As a
what you were
requirement.
supposed to do. It was like, yeah, you had to, right? It's like, it's something that was always in our life's plan. If there's nothing to model your experience on, there's no like path, like, you know, if your parents didn't go to college, it's harder to kind of envision yourself. And I think it's kind of, it's a tired phrase, but representation matters. And that's just not just in media, but also in role models, or in people that you look up to, people that are in your community, older brothers, uncles, aunties. And if there's no one that you can see that has taken this path, right? If you're like literally, and a lot of my friends in high school were like the first members of their family to go on to college. It's kind of hard to be a trailblazer, right? Especially in a place where like,
Because you have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah,
that's one of the things that if you aren't taught about like white privilege and how rigged the game of capitalism is, like when you like before you go to college, like it can really be disheartening, because you're like, I made it with like all my hard work, and you know, I'm gonna make a better life for myself and my family, and then you see
yeah.
how rigged it is. It's really hard to like push through that.
And if you didn't come from like, you know, even the well-to-do families, like I didn't know I had to be making friends with rich white people in college. Like my life would have been so much easier if I had just like made friends with like the ruling class, right? Like it's,
And also, like, if you think about it, like, you know, representation matters. Yeah, like we say that because if you can see it, you can believe it, right? But it's also very practical, and not even in terms of like education, right? Like a lot of, for example, a lot of like Korean immigrants, you know, there's a joke saying like, why do so many Koreans like open up liquor shops and dry clean business? That's not so much the case anymore now that like economic prosperity with generational wealth and higher education has afforded, you know, their children to take care of their parents with better opportunities. But it's just like they were able to set up businesses because other people had done it before them and gave them like the cheat book. Like they gave them like all of the directions on like how to make it work step by step. And it's
Yeah.
like that's pretty much the same thing with, you know, us going to college and going into fields like medicine or the arts. It's like, yeah, if one person makes it, they can bring back the cheat code.
yeah.
Yeah. And we move on to the next story. We would have been princes, which is
For a lot of
I
our
don't know,
readers,
like-
this was their favorite story. And I think I really like this one as well.
I did really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Like it was very much like a Crazy Rich Asians side story,
not
but like
really,
a Bravo
though.
version of it.
Yeah. I mean,
Like Bravo TV version.
this is
of-
probably the most after parties of the after party stories, right? Because it's literally about an after party. And yeah, I had, it was really like, granted, like my family isn't like this family, but I have been around other families that are kind of like this family, which is like kind of big, kind of boisterous, and everyone's always talking shit about each other.
Yeah. I mean, like the opulence of this wedding and like the sheer like materialism that is displayed. It's like, oh, isn't that funny? Or I guess like ironic that a family that, you know, escaped the genocide, survived through poverty, climbed up the economic ladder, and now they're spending all this money just to show off.
I mean, we say opulent, but like the way it's described, it's very gauche, right?
Very
like,
gauche, very gaudy, yeah. But it's still like a ton of money that
Yeah.
they spent where it's
But
like,
that's
oh, you could have
how.
spent that money on like on starting a business, on,
But for
tuition.
but for people who escape poverty or escaped, like,
I know.
like this is how you. I mean, a lot of, like, again, this story really talks about how, like, transactional relationships are in, like, families, and also, like, they're not putting on, like, this big opulent wedding because they can. They're doing it so they can prove to everyone else how well off they're doing. Right? It's meant
Yeah,
to
and also to
be.
collect.
So yeah, like the central, like, kind of driving force behind the story is, um, these two brothers are sent on a mission by their mom to find out if their uncle, their notoriously cheap uncle, actually gave a red envelope at this wedding. And this is because the mom doesn't want to give the uncle a red envelope for his own upcoming green card wedding, to be specific, if he had not contributed to the family himself, which is just
Yeah.
a very fun setup, right?
It's like such a small stakes heist that your characters are put through, because like she makes her sons do all the work, right?
Yeah.
Um and I really did like the two sons. You have Ben, who is the younger brother, who is, a paralegal, but also an artist living outside of Oakland. And, you know, like he jokes that he was able to pursue art because his older brother like fucked up, and his parents were allowed to just like
Yeah.
let him pursue his dreams. Or I guess like, I mean he was like practical. He's still a paralegal, but um yeah.
I mean, it is like,
Um
it's a very Asian thing to kind of put all your hopes and dreams onto the oldest son, right? And, like, I did feel bad for him because, much like the narrator from the shop, is someone who on paper did everything he was supposed to. He went to college, he got a job in finance, but, like, it's not that he couldn't hang, right? But it's just like he was not ready to, like, face working in corporate America.
yeah. Also like substance abuse, like Adderall abuse, that that led into other substances. And it's like, yeah, like when you're put in such a high pressure situation, like, oh, you're like considered the ticket out of poverty for your family, like that's just like a lot to be dealing with. And then it's like you go to school and everything's like super competitive, so like Adderall comes in, and I have like my whole thoughts on that. But it's like, but you know the story is he did everything that he was supposed to. He made a lot of money until his drug addiction fucked everything up, and then he had to go to rehab, and now he's having a hard time kind of assimilating back into society because like having rehab on like your record is not great for employment opportunities. But also like the drugs pretty much cooked his brain. Like he can't like answer interview questions anymore. Like he's been in such like a state of like, oh my god, I have to like be the best. I have to survive. I have to survive in order for like us to be able to leave poverty. Like all of that pressure just really cooked his brain. And
Yeah.
it's just like, that's fucked up. I mean, whose fault is it in the end? I mean, everyone is to blame, really, but
Yeah, but it's like just being under that pressure definitely didn't help, right? And also, I don't think it really felt like, while it seemed like he had a supportive family, that they didn't really understand why neither, right? Like, I think the hardest thing is, like, in all families really, is getting people to admit to the harm that they did, right?
and
Um,
also I totally forgot about this, but um what is it, like the mother, like she was severely depressed, and it was her sons who had to take care of her when they were like in middle school and high school. Like imagine carrying that weight around
yeah.
too. Yeah.
So in a sense, like, people will gossip and say, "Oh, he couldn't hang," but, like, I think what Anthony does really well is give us a full picture of like, here's everything that's like hanging on this guy. Like here is like, and a lot of the characters in his stories, like there's a lot of generational trauma, generational PTSD that everyone has to carry, like all the younger generation has to carry with them, in addition to their own hopes and dreams and the hopes and dreams of like their community. And it's, again, these are things that like someone with more privilege does not have to carry. And so are we really in a on an even playing field, right? Like it kind of asks you to, you know, on paper, like if you met this guy like just randomly, you can say, oh, this guy's like he's a watch, he's a burnout, right? But it's like all burnouts have a story.
Yeah.
What did you think about the other characters in this party? Specifically what's the maid of honor? Like the type A like party planner that's just like constantly trying to like manage the party.
I felt so bad for her. Like Southeast Asian and Chinese like weddings or something else. It is like it's way too much. But also like she like as bad as I felt for her, because like she, you know, is genuinely dealing with a lot. It's a very big party, very big personalities, and you have a lot of money that you have to actually like be in charge of. But you know, she has like this superiority savior complex. You know, she's like, I'm the accountant, I pay back to my community by doing everyone's taxes pro bono because that is what is expected of me, and that is what it is to be a good community member. And it's like, girl, no one put this burden on you except you.
I mean, no one put this burden on her, but also everyone put this burden on her. It's definitely read like eldest daughter, let's say syndrome, right?
She's one of those people where I'm like, you should have left and never came back. Like like sometimes you should just be selfish, because that is the only way to be healthy. But
then everyone at the party would be talking about how selfish she is, right? And how like if she didn't offer her service pro bono, it'd be the same as if, you know, the dad from the shop didn't offer the friend prices to his community. Like they just be like, oh, but why don't you want to be like, I think like, I don't.
There are so many takers in this village that provides absolutely nothing in return. And it's like, you can't call yourself a village and not like replenish the pot, you know? Like, ugh, it's a scam community.
And then, you know, another character in the story is the celebrity singer that got hired to perform at the wedding, and whom the brothers had to, you know, kind of play host to, right?
Yeah. Are they the only like Cambodian national at this wedding?
I think so, because everyone else is like, I mean, Cambodian national in terms of like still living from Cambodia.
Yeah, still living in Cambodia, yeah.
Because, you know, like we never go into like legal status of everyone at the party too, because they're all, you know, one would assume refugees.
But it's like they hired someone from Cambodia, flew them over, and they're the most Cambodian out of this room of Cambodians.
Yeah, and you know, she definitely like offers a different perspective too for a lot of things. But also, I did love the lines where she was like, "Man, Cambodian men are the same everywhere," right?
Yeah, I did like their tricks in trying to get the shady uncle to reveal that he didn't pay his red envelope at all. They find it in his wallet because she's like, okay, it's time to do the traditional butt groping.
She like pickpockets him, which I think that's, you know, at the end, the simplest solution is often the best, right? Because the brothers had like all these like real convoluted plans. Like the older brother had a really half-cocked plan that, like, even as he was describing, I was like, I don't think that works, right? Because the older brother's plan was to have him self-write down how much he gave, expecting...
You can write down any number. Yeah, I was just like, you used to be in finance, but that's how you know alcohol brain is taking over, because there's no logical sense behind it.
And just the growing chaos as everyone at this party gets drunker and drunker, right? It really did remind me of like a college after party, right?
Yeah, like the fact that everybody went to the after party was just astounding to me. I'm like, you guys, like, how old are you? Because my body could never. But at the same time, it sounds like the after party were for the second gens specifically. They're just like, yeah, like the wedding, the banquet, that was like for our parents and the old people. We couldn't party like we wanted to. So now this is our party. And it's like, okay, even if you don't want to drink, like you kind of go because you're like, this is where, you know, the real celebration's happening.
Which makes it extra kind of weird that the uncle arrived. And was he younger? Was he like a young uncle, or was he like the old guy at this young person party, right?
I don't know. But like he had his whole like drunken speech on being like, you know why I'm rich? It's because I screwed other people over. It's because of capitalism.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how you get ahead. You trick other people into doing your work for you, or like giving you like your due. And it's like, wow, what a dirtbag.
I mean, he is like the embodiment of like the taker mentality that we've seen throughout the book, right? Because he literally puts nothing in.
And you're the richest person in this freaking room. It's like, come on.
But he still expects everyone to give him money when he gets married, right? And according to the mom, he's getting married for money as well, right? Because he's doing a green card wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I did like that in the end, like we end the story with like a good brother to brother moment, because you know, even with all the chaos of like the wedding, of like having to adhere to like, you know, all these Cambodian traditions and culture and all the weight that entails, you know, like it's still community and still family that kind of drives these characters. And, you know, it's in family that they kind of find their center as well, right?
Yeah.
All right, the next story is, what's the next one?
Human development. And this is the story about a high school teacher who starts a relationship with an older Cambodian man, and he slowly becomes distrustful of their relationship because it seems like the older Cambodian guy is just dating him because he's a Cambodian guy, and because of that they need to be together. And I was like, okay, well.
And there's a lot going on in this story, right? Because the main character, the narrator, is again one of the members of the community that got out, right? He went to college, has a degree in philosophy, I want to say, and is a teacher at like a rich kid school in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, like he's a twin, and his twin counterpart is very type A, very much we are going to plan our future together. And you know, like she definitely has more ambition and drive. That's why she's like working at like a top exec job in New York, and she's just like, it's okay, you study philosophy, you go get your master's, and at some point we're going to take over the world, you know. Like yeah, he seems like he didn't really seem to have much ambition, but I don't think that's a fault, to be honest.
No, I mean, I think again, it's like what we've been talking about, right? There's really no one to like model. Like he probably studied philosophy because he liked it, right? And I forgot, was he the one who like talked about studying philosophy because he couldn't cut it in biology and becoming a doctor,
biology,
right?
Yeah,
which is like, you know, a pretty common story for a lot of like Asian Americans, which is like at some point we realize that like, hey, maybe being a doctor isn't what I was meant to do, right? But because there was no, you know, one would imagine because there was no one else to model like what to do with a philosophy degree, like he kind of fell into teaching. And from reading the story, like even though it might not be like what he expected to do or what he, you know, thought he would be doing, he seems to be taking it pretty seriously, right? He is trying to teach the kids that he's teaching, like, was ethics, like what's like it's like being a global citizen, right? That was kind of like his class, through Moby Dick, which is a book I did not read in high school. I
have not read. Yeah, I feel so terrible for saying that, but at the same time I'm like, it's a really long book, okay? Like yeah.
But you know, it really seems like he's not half-assing his job. Like he's taking it seriously. He really wants to like do his job well.
Yeah, but I do his whole relationship with his like with the older Cambodian man. I don't remember his name. What the hell was his name? I can't just call him daddy, but like I just thought it was so like I was like so interested and like grossed out by this older Cambodian man's like okay, yeah, like community is so important. I'm gonna make an app for it, and it's like that's not how
It's a very
community works.
like he's definitely a tech bro, right? Like he probably talks about disrupting all the time and like is very it seems like he's coming to his like
he's finally allowed to be like proud of his heritage. And
also it sounds like he came out recently, right? He came out later in life, right? And I think it was really interesting because it really reminds me of like I had a friend who like grew up the only Asian in their community, and in college they kind of had like their identity awakening, and I don't want to say go overboard because like I don't think it's going overboard, but like got really into being Asian, right? And wanted to.
I've been accused of being that person, and yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, and it really seems like it was kind of ringing those bells, which is like this is someone who for the longest time had to either downplay who he was or hide who he was, and is now like kind of I guess freed himself to like be as Cambodian and as gay as he wants to be. And it did seem I did feel like the narrator was kind of a jerk to kind of hate on him for that,
Well, I think his reasons were like legitimate though, because it was just like, are you in a relationship with me because of me or because of the fact that I am a gay Cambodian and there's only so few of us in the world, and like because of the genocide there seems to be like this like burden placed on the next generation to repopulate and to take care of the next generation. And it's just like I get it, because it's just like you don't want it. It's like a weird fetishism in a way. Like I don't know, like I'm just thinking about like people who are just like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to marry within my ethnicity. Like those are the only types of people that I can end up with in the future, because that is the only way we'll be able to understand each other on a human level. And I'm like, I don't think that's like, I think you're kidding yourself. But yeah,
I mean, there is a thing. I mean, again, everyone's looking for different things in relationships, right? Like, and like for me, like when I was dating, I was like, I started off like, I wasn't like against dating outside of like Asians, but definitely like my preference was to date another Asian because of like, it's hard enough to like, unless you're like in a situation where you're meeting people all the time, you get to know them, right? Right off the bat, like, especially in online dating, like you need to find those common touch points in order to kind of at least get the sense that, okay, here's someone I could vibe with, right? And that may be ethnicity, that may be interest, that may be, certain things. But sometimes like, like, I don't think it's a bad thing that he was looking for a Cambodian to date, right? And that was important to him.
It was important to him, but he was also like holding, I think Anthony is the high school teacher, which is funny because like Anthony is the name of the author, but like he was holding Anthony like in kind of like a hostage position, because like even when Anthony's like, hey, so I like cheated on you, quote unquote cheated, because they hadn't like set the boundaries of the relationship yet. But it's just like, he's like, oh, well, I want to keep you. And it's like, dude, please read, like, I don't know. It just seemed kind of like a relationship where he's like, oh, you're my safe space because this is such like a small niche community that doesn't really exist anywhere else. Like a gay Cambodian person who is also highly educated, like, oh my God, dream partner. And it felt like a lot of projection.
I mean, yeah. I mean, relationships sometimes are, at least at the beginning, projection. You're projecting what you want. I think safe space is also an important, like, ongoing theme in this story, right? Because that's the name of the app that he's creating, which is like creating a safe space for communities. Which doing it in the app is such like a it's a very
But some
like
people
tech
don't want to
bro
be.
2010s thing to do. But I think so. You're right. That's projection because like obviously this older guy, really seems like he craves connection, he craves a safe space, and he craves like belonging, right? Because one can assume that he did not have that for like most of his life.
Also, like, the thing is, like, forcing people to be a part of community when they're trying to escape the community is, like, not great either, because you don't know what the community has done to them, like, trauma wise, you know? Like, so I can kind of see, like, Anthony's point of view or anybody else's, like, point of view of, like, hey, like, I kind of want to be seen separate from the ethnic conclave that I come from. And when your partner is like very hyper fixated on your shared cultural trait like that, yeah, it just kind of comes off creepy in my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm not being like articulate about it, but it's just like that was like while I was reading the story, I was just like, this relationship is not healthy. There is no communication. Like, I mean, what is happening?
I agree that the way that the guy went about it is not the best. I think also like it's not what he's looking for. But at the same time, I can see where like if you lived your entire life without feeling like you belong, without like that community, without a safe space, that like when you find one, like I can see why you would latch on to that, right? You know, it doesn't help that it comes in the package of like a very tech bro guy who like talks in tech bro speak. I guess for me, it's also like, this is also a story about how like, even if you're from the same community, you might not want the same things, right?
I mean, I don't think it's wrong to like want your partner to be from the same background as you in terms of like ethnicity and like culture and whatnot and class and education. But it's just like like love isn't a checkbox, like a checklist, you know, just because they feel like these traits that you desperately want in another person, like it doesn't make them the right person for you. So I don't know, that was just like my whole thing.
Yeah, I think what I felt from Anthony was like sometimes you don't want to be like the cultural guide for like your partner, right? Like, because, you know, while they did share the same culture and the same like kind of touch points, they were also in different parts of their journey with it.
And also like the older Cambodian guy, like he has an older mindset of like, oh, I need to settle down. I need to repopulate the earth, especially since, you know, there was a genocide that killed like most of my race. So we have to repopulate. And it's like, you know, people are perfectly okay not having children. They're okay with living as single people. And that's where I kind of got like I'm like, I think you're projecting. I think you're trying to see if you can mold Anthony into your ideal partner, because he's trying to like change his mind on like the kids thing as well. And you just kind of see him do it in like many instances where he's like, oh, like, you know, maybe we can do this and this. And it's like Anthony is a human being, not like a freaking piece of clay that you can like slowly mold into like the partner of your desires. But yeah, I mean, it was a very like, it was like a complicated relationship, you know, because you know, we talk about like generational trauma from like parents to children, but it's also like passed through passed sideways throughout the community. So yeah,
and there's definitely like a, you know, we talk about how seniority is a big aspect of like, or respect for seniority is a big aspect of like Asian cultures, and you can definitely see that play through here as well. Yeah, and it definitely didn't help that he was just such a tech bro, right? I feel like I can sympathize with his like wanting to explore his identity now that like he has freed himself to, But at the same time, like just so many red flags on this guy, right? Like,
And also using Anthony's like Stanford connections as well. Just it's like Anthony doesn't care about like his classmates from Stanford, but it's like just the fact that like his older Cambodian boyfriend is like, oh my god, this is the time to like optimize my chances. And it's like that is another ick. Just seeing people as like resources for you to use and exploit and take. Some soul searching has to be done, my guy.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Luckily,
we have
this story has some graphic like love scenes. Luckily, I was not driving through a drive-through when I was listening to those, so didn't have to
I was
suffer.
playing it on my laptop, and then I was just like, I'm just going to stop and read it with my eyeballs because I don't know, like hearing someone read those scenes out loud, I'm like, I don't know, it's more visually graphic for some reason with someone narrating it to me. So
I think we're both very visual readers too. You know, like we were able to picture scenes in our heads. So definitely, I think that effect is amplified when you're hearing someone describe it to you rather than reading it for yourself, right?
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the second to last short story is Somali Sere Sere Somali, which like we mentioned is the direct sequel to Molly Molly Molly. This time centering on the baby from that first story who has now grown up to become a nurse at a I want to say is a hospice or like
I think it's a hospice, yeah.
And is kind of assigned to take care of her grandmother, right? Or her great aunt.
It was her great aunt.
Yeah, her great aunt. And right off the bat, I was kind of surprised that we got a direct sequel, but also like maybe reframe because I don't think we didn't get the year from that first story, right?
No, we didn't. Yeah.
So if this was taking place, let's say like 2020-ish, then the first story probably took place in like 90s, right? Or 2000s, early 2000s.
Because Sere is 23 years old.
Yeah.
In the story. So yeah, it's been roughly 20 years.
Yeah, this story really explores like the consequences of like the traditions from that first story, right? Like what happens when you put all of your expectations from like a dead relative onto like another person.
Yeah, when you project a dead person onto a living person, like what are you forcing them to carry, and how does it affect everyone? And I was really surprised that we did revisit a number of years later with Sere being like an actual adult. And I was pleasantly surprised that like Molly came back too. And it wasn't like a happy reconciliation, like because like in the previous short story, Molly Molly Molly, it seemed like Molly is like, okay, well, this is a baby, and like this is an actual person separate from my dead mother. Like they should not be responsible for any resentment that I carry. But it's revealed like once the baby crossed over to like talking stage and actually being a person, like their resentment came back. And I was like, oh, interesting.
I mean, given the characterization of Molly from that first story, like I was skeptical if that was going to stick because she does seem like a very like petty. Is petty the right word? Like she seems to hold a lot of resentment for people who either disappoint her or don't do what she wants them. Like she seems to hold like a lot of resentment in her heart, right? She had a lot of resentment for Vez for leaving her, right? She had a lot of resentment for Maeng for like imposing her dead mother's soul onto this baby. And she had a lot of resentment for the baby. And I don't think that goes away, right? Maybe temporarily, but I also imagine like Maeng probably never let her forget that this baby was her mom.
I was about to say, like, I'm pretty sure the relationship would have been different if Maeng didn't like treat the baby as if like as if she was the reincarnation of Molly's like dead mother, because it's
Yeah.
like, you know, you had your chance to have a relationship with Molly's mother when she was alive, but Molly didn't really, you know, get to have that opportunity herself, you know?
Yeah. And I think this was probably the first short story, like, you know, that we actually got scenes from the autogenocide from the Khmer Rouge. And from the prose, it seems like either Sarai really was the reincarnation of Molly's mom, or because of like the stories that are passed down, she like those are ingrained in her subconscious, but like she does dream about the life of Molly's mom, right?
I believe more in the latter, you know, like because so many stories were told and passed down to her, like it kind of manifests in her dreams. And also it's like, how stressful is it that she becomes like the 24-hour home care person for Ma Eng? And, you know, it's her job, it's her professional job, and she can't even request like a different patient because she's the only like Cambodian speaking nurse at that facility. So it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I did like their relationship between like, because Ma Eng is in like very late stage dementia, and everything is just like, is this a ghost? Is this the past? Is this like limbo, whatever? Like I just love how much care Saray put into taking care of Ma Eng, even though Ma Eng put like such a questionable burden on her to cosplay as like this dead person, pretty much.
Yeah. And it really also makes you think about like, there's this one line where Saray's talking about how she's not actually saving money to buy a house and to start a life. She's like saving money to make sure her mom goes to a better hospice or better care
hospital,
home, right? Yeah, because she sees how like her coworkers treat their patients, right? And it's like, you know, I need to make sure my mom goes to a better place than this.
Yeah, I mean, they joke around saying like, oh, it's hurting the zombies, hurting the Walking Dead, because, you know, these are late dementia patients. And then some of the nurses don't even wash like their patients like properly, like very thoroughly as they should, because it's like, oh, they're going to die anyway. And it's gross to bathe naked, saggy, old people. So no. And it's like, you know, that's someone's loved one. But at the same time, the relatives, the loved ones don't show up most of the time. It's like the nurses at these hospice who are doing all of the caretaking. And they're usually the ones who interact with the loved one the most. So it's just like, well, they're giving more care than the actual blood relatives in this case. So, but I thought it was really cool that, through the dream, Saray is like, she asks her mom, like, hey, is there any jewelry that Ma Eng like gave us that belonged to her, like her dead daughter? And it turns out like she had like a gold chain, and then she passes that on to Molly's biological daughter.
Well, at first she wants to pass it on or give it to Molly herself.
Yeah, give it to Molly herself. Yeah.
You know, she even recognized there's this resentment that Molly carries for her because of her supposed, you know, her supposedly being the reincarnation of her mom. And like, you know, she wants to bury that hatchet, right? She wants to move on from that. But then she also realized that there's no moving on from that for Molly, because they spent their entire lives like at odds with each other because of like this expectation placed onto Saray from Ma Eng. And so I thought it was like it was poetic that she ends up like, you know, she makes it up to Molly by giving essentially the birthright, right? The birthright of her mother to her daughter.
Yeah. I'm like rereading some of the passages right now. Each day I start my shift with the intention of giving Molly the necklace. Each day I fail. When she addresses me, I can barely look her in the eyes. I don't want to give Molly the satisfaction. Don't want her to think I'm apologizing for my existence and that I'm submitting to her perspective, her conviction that I've wrongfully held on to the memory of her mother, that I'm an interloper of her inheritance. And then further on, sometimes I wish I could refuse her version of our history the way she does mine. That this would be enough. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it, girl. Spite. like if someone treats your existence as if it was a burden, as if, you know, like it's like you don't belong here, you're an interloper, then yeah, like even though you know logically burying the hatchet is probably the right thing to do, like how do you do that emotionally with someone who has so viscerally like hated your guts from the moment you were born?
Yeah, and you know, the fact that like the source of all this conflict, of this resentment, is someone who, you know, Molly can't even get closure from anymore, right? And you know, all like the source of all this resentment, of all this conflict, is this community believing this tradition. And even from that first story, like you can read it as like a way for them to cope with loss, right? Like it's easier to believe in concepts like reincarnation, because I imagine it to be really hard to cope with like surviving an autogenocide, right? Which is like a genocide on your own people, which is what happened with the Khmer Rouge. And the idea that those souls can come back and live with us, I can see that as a way that Mai coped with her survivor's guilt, which is like, okay, like the people I've lost are still here with me. But in imposing that, in like absolving herself from this guilt, you impose the next generation with the result of that guilt, right? Like it's the unintentional passing down of trauma, because she can't even be called out for it, right? Because of filial piety and respecting your elders, right? Like kind of just being trapped by your own culture is not a good feeling. I think that's something that we can all relate to as like diaspora, right? Because I think it's a very core theme for a lot of Asian American stories, which is like, how do we become our own person, but also like live up to the cultural expectations from like a whole other country? And yeah, I thought it was really cool that the solution was to, you know, some things we just can't fix, but we can start things off on the right foot with the next generation, which is like the solution that Suri comes up with. And, you know, out of all the stories, these last two probably end on the most hopeful notes, which is like, you know, how do we move on? How do we step out from all of this like sadness, right?
Yeah. And just like, you know, a lot of the times when I'm sure for people who are not familiar with the Khmer Rouge, like and the genocide, like they probably picked this book up thinking like, oh, it's gonna be all like sadness from that time period. But like Marvin mentioned, this is the first story, and it's the second to last story in this collection that, you know, even brings up like imagery from the war. So all of the other horrors that we have seen in this book, it's like, oh, this is what happens when you get here. We're worried about the horrors that are happening here, not back there. Like, so it makes sense that the last story is like, okay, how do we move forward? How do we make sure that we like it's going to be impossible not to carry the trauma with us to the next generation, but how do we prepare them to like cope with it the best they can?
Yeah. So our last story, Generational Differences, is a story about a woman who's a teacher whose son learns about a violent school shooting at his mom's school, and, you know, has her take him to her school so he can like check things out, right? And I thought it was really interesting that we get a lot of stories about like second generation or children of immigrants learning about their family's secrets. And here we have a story which is like, these are the reasons why our parents keep secrets from us, right? Or this is why the older generation like doesn't talk about these things, which I don't think it's something that is explored that often in like, especially in like Asian American literature, right?
Yeah. I was really surprised because I had never heard about the Stockton schoolyard shooting, which is the shooting that the mom here had survived. And it took place in 1989, and that's before I was born. So it's like, oh, like mass school shootings that like existed like even before I was alive. That's crazy. And you know, like tragedies like that have like increased, unfortunately. So like school shootings, like the frequency of it has been increased over the years to a point where you have elementary school kids being taught, hey, don't go to the window, like this is the best way to hide, pretend how you're dead, and like pretend to be dead when when the intruder arrives, like do this, do that. So this is how you protect yourself. And it's like, wow, like what are we teaching these kids? And like I don't know, it was just so tragic to me when like the son was just like, mom, like how could you have like looked out the window, like I'm a third grader and I know better than that. And I was like
Yeah, because like again, like as a new parent, I think about the stuff that my kids are going to learn in school. And like, you know, when I was in school, we had earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but we never had active shooter drills, right? That's like something that is relatively recent because of the prevalence of school shootings now in this country. And it's like, that's not leveling up, right? That's like leveling down.
I mean, yeah, like I think it's like really terrifying that kids these days, they can like differentiate the sound between a firework going off in the distance and like an actual gunshot, and they can tell the difference. Like that is like the level of trauma that we are imparting on the children of this generation. But I mean, as sad as it is to hear the son be like, hey, like you should know better because shooting drills like taught me as a third grader to not like look out the window because that's dangerous. With that knowledge, there's also like this confidence of like, hey, like we have to ask questions. We have to like hold people accountable. Like our lives actually have meaning. Whereas like the previous generation, the mom's generation, is just like, we are just trying to, I don't know, like we don't want to be loud. We don't want to ask questions. Like we should just be grateful that we are, you know, allowed into the room that they're letting us into.
I thought it was kind of funny that this whole situation was brought upon by the son finding a picture of like Michael Jackson visiting their school, right? And it was like a slip of the tongue by the mom that like triggered the son to like, wait, what do you mean victims? What do you mean shooting? Right? Tell me more. And American pop music is also another theme throughout the book, right? Like the Cambodian community's like love of American pop culture, rock music, Michael Jackson, and like the fact that like Michael Jackson visiting the school was such a big moment for like the father, like the husband. And there's like that one interesting aside where like he loves Michael Jackson so much that he like spent the last few years denying all like the allegations on him, right? But through her perspective, we also see that like him coming to the school was also kind of like a performative gesture. And it kind of brings to mind like just tragedies like this have become so like common, right? That like even their reaction to it has become essentially commodified, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, especially for Cambodian refugees, because like think about like movies that were made about like the genocide, you know, like the violence that they have seen in the media. It's like sensationalized in a way to like make it feel appealing to the mainstream audience. And that's kind of like how it is with like Michael Jackson in this story. It's like, hey, like why are you showing up now for these kids? Like if they mattered, like maybe if they mattered to you as like a community member, you would have highlighted them earlier rather than waiting until they were shot dead. And And I just feel like that kind of like commercializing or commodifying tragedies for like your own benefit, even if it is like with the intention to, you know, for like more exposure, it's still like, oh, it's a form of
Yeah.
it's a form of hurt in itself. Like you see that with a lot of TikTokers too. Like,
Yeah. And we also see that
Yeah.
with the mom's coworker, right? The other teacher who like,
yeah,
you know, breaks down the tears when she hears about why the son is at the school because he learned about the shooting, and seems to be bewildered that the narrator isn't reacting the way that she wants her to, right? The way that she expects her to, right?
it's like, why aren't you reacting? Like,
This is so sad. Why aren't you crying, right?
yeah, like why aren't you crying? Yeah, and it's just like not everything has to be a performance for you, Brenda. Like, I don't know if her coworker's name was Brenda, but
yeah.
like there's a line where she says, it's like, I wanted her to stop filtering the world through her own tears. And I'm like, yes, white women tears, you know, always centering other people's problems through their perspective. And it's like their perspective is very powerful because people, you know, like put white women on a pedestal, you know, but it's like there's a reason why like once like there's a joke in grassroots communities that like when white women join en masse to a cause, that's when you know that you've like made progress because the last group of that demographic has been reached. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, but I do like how her kid is also just like, can we go now? Like,
Yeah. I'm over
her
this.
kid is just like, I don't want. Her kid is like very much like, I'm not performing for Brenda here, and like it made me really sad when they were driving back home, and like the mom is just like kind of like going through her thoughts, and like nothing. You think that like nothing serious is happening, but then her kid is like breaking down, like melting down in the back of her car, and like it's not until later that you realize, oh wait, like her mom was like in like a catatonic shock, you know, and was like not responding to her kid at all because, you know, she was not processing the trauma that had happened, or she was, but like it wasn't like
Yeah.
yeah
Definitely. Like, I read it as hopeful because it is a story about a mom and child communicating and like kind of processing this trauma so it doesn't like coagulate into generational trauma. But it also portrays ways that, you know, that trauma does subconsciously get like passed down or subconsciously gets manifested, right?
And I think this story, if forgive me if I'm incorrect, but it was written as if it was like a journal entry or like a memoir, being like, I'm writing this to you now as you are an adult, and like
Yeah, it's like epistolary style, right? Like
yeah, and it seems like she had written about like about the genocide in like previous chapters, and that like this chapter is specifically on the Stockton shooting and like, you know,
yeah.
like her child's like personal relationship to it. So I was just like, oh, interesting how we are now equipped to help the next generation deal with generational trauma. Because a lot of the times it's like the parents, the grandparents, they're not going to talk. They don't want to talk. And if you ask them questions, they either joke about it or they, you know, either clam up or they kind of like be very vague about their answers. And then here you have a mom who like wrote a freaking memoir,
Yeah.
and like listing all of the things that happened, and is able to give her kid like time to understand the damage that's been done to like her as a parent and whatnot. So
Yeah, and that's definitely something that was really interesting, which is like, it sounds like he's been asking questions this entire time. And like now she is finally ready to kind of tell her side of it. And again, we don't really get this side. Like we always get we're more used to seeing the perspective, like the kid or the next generation trying to find answers. You know, this story gives us the perspective of the person who was withholding, and that's because they themselves have not processed everything that they went through and were themselves not ready to talk about it too, right? And I think, again, this in the last story does end on like a more hopeful note that like this is like, to move forward, we do need to talk about this, but you can't force it, right? Like, we need to be ready not only to tell the story, but also to listen to the story. Yeah.
And I think the title Generational Differences really sums it up, how we deal with generational trauma and how we deal with mental health and gentle parenting. And hopeful ending. And you just go back to that feeling again of like, oh man, like we're not going to get more stories from Anthony. And
like it's sad to think about like what would have come next, right? Like he has such a, all of his stories have such a strong voice and strong point of view, and the way he's able to talk about this community holistically, that like we're both laughing at the absurdities of the community, but also we're also sympathizing with the characters, a lot of the characters who seem kind of trapped within the community. And it is sad to know that like we won't get to see what would have come next, right? How would he take these voices and like tell either more stories or different stories with these themes.
I sound like a really old person when I say this, but it's just like, oh, the stories, like the prose felt young. It sounded young to me, especially with like a lot of like the sexual aspects in the book. I'm just like, oh, this is what a young writer would write. So I get like really sad when I think about like, oh, like I would have loved to have seen another collection from Anthony with him being in his 30s and having lived through his 20s and reflect on those experiences more. I would have loved to have seen what he had written with his gloves coming off, being like, okay, like like the mainstream media wants me to talk about Cambodian refugee generational trauma, but I'm going to do it my way. And then for the next piece of work, it's like, okay, well, strip another layer and another layer and another layer, because so much of what is being released in media is catered to white people. So you always have, even if you don't mean to, like you always have to put their sensibilities like ahead of like your goals, because it's like, well, you do have to make money. You do have to you have to be like critically acclaimed. And unfortunately, like that is the way it is when it comes to gaining success in media. So it's just like, I would have loved to have seen the gloves come off, but yeah.
But I'm glad that we read this book. Thank you for choosing it for a book club pick.
Yeah.
And it's definitely like, and I feel kind of dirty for saying this, but like if someone was to create again, speaking of performative measures, but like a list of books you should read in the midst of all these, immigration raids and stuff, like this is a book that I definitely would put on that list. Right? If you want to read stories that like humanize and put you in the shoes of like members of like these vulnerable communities that like are under siege, like this book does that.
Yeah. I mean, it won like the National Books Critics Circle Award. It like was named like a best book of the year by New York Times, NPR. NPR is probably like the first time I've like heard about this book. And I'm really glad that we picked Yeah, and I'm really glad that we got to pick up this collection before the stories aged, I guess, because this came out in 2021 and now it's like 2025, and it still seems as fresh as ever.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that'll do it for a discussion of Afterparties by Anthony Veasna. So if you've read along with us and have any thoughts on the book itself or on our discussion, please let us know either on Discord or Goodreads. We always love to hear what you think about our discussions. But before we go, July is our next Patron's Choice Book Club pick. Rira, can you let us know what our patrons want us to read?
Yeah, so we are reading Pingsu for Two by Sujin Witherspoon. And it is an adorable enemies to lovers coffee shop romance. So definitely a much lighter tone than the books that we have read for the last couple months.
Yeah, looking forward to Bingsu is a summer treat. I think, full disclosure, I don't think I've ever had a Bingsu.
What? You've never had Pingsu? You've never had shaved ice?
I've
You've
had shaved ice. Is it different?
Yeah, that's
what's the difference?
Bingsu.
Is there a difference between like Taiwanese shaved ice and like Korean Bingsu, or
No, not really. I mean, in terms of like toppings, different. Yeah, toppings are different, but like Pingsu is just shaved ice with like sweetened condensed milk or whatever to like flavor it.
So
you've
I
had
have
Bingsu
had
before.
it, just not under that name. But yeah, looking forward to the good vibes. As always, we will be reading along on Discord, so if you are a Patreon supporter, check out the Discord thread for our reading schedule. And for everyone else, you can also let us know your thoughts on the book by commenting on our Goodreads forums. But with that, yeah, thank you so much for listening to our discussion of Afterparties by Anthony Veasna. So we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Life gets a little crazy sometimes. Sometimes it's confusing, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it can just piss us off. Enter First of All Podcast. It's a safe space for real conversations about the things that we all struggle with, celebrate, contemplate, and work through in our daily lives. I'm your host, Mindy Chang. I'm an actor, filmmaker, and entrepreneur with a colorful background, a full life, and brilliant friends who I love to unpack life with to share with all of you. They are everyday people like you and me, ranging from award-winning artists, cultural icons, powerful CEOs, my hilarious childhood friends, and even my mom. Tune in for honest conversations on mental health, dating, sex, family, career, culture, and everything in between. Listen to First of All wherever you find podcasts, part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.